Howdy, this is the Views from the Schott podcast. I'm your host, your one and only host, Tim Miller, and today it is Thursday, September 4th, 2025, and I wish you a very, very, very happy National Macadamia Nut Day. Today's show continues the summer guest series. Q Banks is back with us for the first time. It's been a little bit, a couple years since you've been here, but excited to have you here today and reconnect a little bit. Before we get into it, if you're new, you don't know the drill if you're new. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Like the video on YouTube. Drop a comment. Say hi to Q. Maybe he'll say hi back if you're lucky. I don't know. Make sure you follow on the socials at the Schott Pod on Twitter and on Instagram as well. This is the only Ohio State basketball exclusive podcast publishing content year round, which means at least once a week. We've had several coaches, some players, some media members on as well. Last conversation with Adam Jardy was fantastic. Encourage you to go watch or listen to that if you haven't been there already. Alrighty, Q, thanks for being here. Sorry. Dr. Banks, thanks for being here. What's it like being a doctor?
It's a lot of the same. Still got to do dishes and mow the yard. There's nothing really changing in my day to day right now.
Do you ever just wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to throw on a lab coat and just feel like a doctor? Or
Yeah, Tim, that's not really my thing. I'm not. I like the dry fitting shorts thing.
I would like to see you in the facilities. I think actually looking like a doctor. I'd like the badge, the lab coat, the stethoscope, all those types of things. I think it would fit you well, but I mean, if you're not into it, I
I'm gonna
guess
leave
that's
that
fine.
I'm gonna leave that up to Aaron Kraft. He's got that.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Alrighty. So it's been a minute since you've been here. Take me through the process. I don't think the last time we spoke you had your PhD. So as I'm, just doing my due diligence and looking at what's new in your life, I
Yeah,
see that. So take me through that and the process and all the work that was involved and everything around it.
yeah. It got to about year 3 or 4 here, right around COVID, and I was looking at how can I keep getting better, blah blah blah. And I told my wife, I said, if I would have got a degree, I would be done by now. 3 or 4 years into this thing at Ohio State. And after COVID, I kind of started doing some research of, what does the next step look like after coaching or even with coaching. Um, at that time, Holtman was the head coach, and we kind of talked it through. And he's like, if you want to do it, do it. Talk to Gene Smith at the time, the AD, and he's like, if you do it, you better finish it. So, spring of 22, I started and graduated last fall, in December. So it was a lot of work. There's actually a semester where I did probably like 14 hours on top of coaching. So that was very, very unpleasant. You can ask my kids and wife about that. But after all of that, it was cool. It was cool to see my kids get to attend my graduation, and they're proud of Papa for being a doctor.
Yeah, so I mean, how on earth do you balance running a strength and conditioning program for a top level Division I program along with getting your doctorate? Like, I mean, what do your days look like?
Yeah, it's they're early and late. Wake up around 3:30, 3:45. You get a little workout in, and then you start reading. Right, everybody starts waking up and hitting your phone about 6, 7 a.m. So making sure that the work's kind of done before that. You coach your groups. You go to class. You just make sure your job's done at a high level. And then, like I said, I'm going to class. Like a lot of those classes were in person, not just online. So it was really challenging to kind of balance work and school. And the life part was just kind of put to the back burner. I was a really bad husband and dad for about 3 years there.
So once you get your PhD, is there like a huge celebration? You go out, or do you just sleep for like 3 days straight?
Yeah, there's a lot of sleep. Maybe a glass of bourbon or so. A cigar there, here or there. But no, like I said, it was more of the day to day. You graduate in December, and we're in season, so it was just kind of like, okay, congratulations. I think we played in Atlanta the night before, and flew in, and graduation was the next day. So it was just kind of ho hum. Let's keep going. Let's see if we can win some games.
And for fans who don't know you, I mean, just factually, the podcast has grown a lot since the first time you joined the show.
Okay.
So there may be a lot of people you're kind of introducing yourself to the first time when it comes to Buckeye Nation. So for the average fan, take me through, what does life look like for you as director of strength and conditioning at Ohio State?
Life is it's a great job. It's a tremendous responsibility, and I don't take lightly. But I'm responsible for everything regarding the physical preparation of the team. So the strength, conditioning, mobility, speed, performance. We do our mobility routines, like everything that has to do with them kind of off the floor from a physical sense. I kind of make sure that we're kind of headed in the right direction. Work with a great team. Tony Lorenzi, our athletic trainer, does a phenomenal job. Christy Sierra, she's our new sport dietitian. She's phenomenal as well. And we kind of make sure, along with Sharon, our sports psychologist, we make sure that everything is kind of fortified and held up and nothing slipping through the cracks there.
So there's a couple different areas you touch. I think one that is really intriguing based off of last season, as you deal with, Colin having surgery over the offseason, you deal with Taysom tearing his ACL. There's some pretty serious injuries and recoveries and things like that. So how do you kind of sit down and craft, hey, here, Colin, here, Taysom, here, whoever, here's how we're going to get you from you're not ready to go right now, but 8 months from now, we want you playing basketball again. How do you, kind of craft a plan like that for players like that?
Yeah, sorry for the fire alarm if you can hear that. Can you hear that?
Yeah, I can.
So we might need to cut this and do this one outside. But when we're formulating a return to play or a guy gets injured and we're coming back from that, we're in communication with the doctors. Again, Tony, our athletic trainer, makes sure that we're following a strict return to play, return to practice progression. We're communicating with Sharon with sports psychology, making sure the guys are in a good mental space. And I'm kind of just waiting to see what can they train. So say if it's a Taysom with the knee, we're training everything but the knee, right? And we're keeping him involved in team activities. You're still traveling, you're still doing all the song and dance of being a player at Ohio State. We're just working around that injury. Colin, the same thing. This has been kind of a long, drawn out thing with him, and you just got to make sure that mentally they're in a good space. Physically, we're kind of making steps to get to the next kind of hurdle we're jumping over. But he's been doing really well meeting those goals, and it's just making sure that you're using the tools that you've gained in your career to implement for them and their benefit.
Are you going to burn down in there? Are
You
we
know,
concerned?
no, I think I'll be okay. We're on the second floor, so if worst comes to worst, we'll see what kind of athlete I am out this window.
Well, they do say heat rises, so it's probably not a good thing. All right, so when it comes to like a player like Colin, I don't remember if he said this actually in our conversation or previous conversations when I've had the chance to speak with him, but he said like every day I was ready to go into the facilities and practice, and for about a month straight, it was no, you can't, you're not ready yet. We got to rush you and things like that. So how do you balance kind of the mental toll of any player, like whether it be Colin Taysom or any other player you've run into, the mental toll of all I want to do is play basketball with the physical challenge of you're just not ready yet? Like, how do you communicate that to players?
They have to have a high sense of awareness of where they are, and then a good sense of patience as well. Coming off an injury, especially with a guy like Colin. Colin's a worker. Let's go, let's go, let's go. So he was absolutely right. Every day he wants to come in, he's ready to roll mentally. Physically, we just have to make sure on our part as professionals that we're not putting him in a situation that he's going to injure himself worse. And then he has to follow like a strict protocol of whatever it looks like on the return to play process. So if it's 10 jump shots today, 15 tomorrow, take a day off. You can't go out and shoot for 3 hours because you may set yourself back. So I think the communication piece of, Tony, Q, I feel good. That's really, really important. That's also a huge component of self-awareness, and you have to be patient in that whole process and let your body do its thing.
So, kind of piggybacking off of that, you have a player like Bruce, for example, who comes in as a freshman and plays a lot. He comes in as a sophomore and plays a lot. He comes in as a junior and plays a lot. When you have a player like that who from day one, from go, they're going to get a lot of playing time. Do you make any changes in how you maybe plan for that player or kind of progress them through a season compared to maybe a freshman who you're just trying to get them into Big Ten shape, essentially?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it goes into kind of the individualized style of training and how you approach it. Bruce is a worker. We have a kind of a team full of those guys now, but um, you have to be smart because he's averaging what 35 minutes a game. So when it comes to the off season, you have to kind of break him down and build back up from the ground up. You can't just keep piling on, because by the time you get to December or January, he's going to be tired. So we were really smart with how much Bruce does, how much he played in the off season, because we knew come January, February, that's when he's going to have to be at his best. When that conference play, we had to go to Purdue and win a game. You can't have your starting point guard tired. So versus a freshman coming in, and when we do our recruiting speeches, we always tell the best thing you can do is just be in shape. We'll get you stronger by via the reps of the weight room, but just be in shape. Be able to stay with the pack. And I, like Miles and Amari, to their credit, this year they came in some really good shape, and they've been able to do just that.
So one topic that comes up too, as it relates to talking about Bruce, is the freshman wall. You kind of feel like you saw that with Bruce, both in his freshman and his sophomore year. From
Yeah.
your experience, is the freshman wall real? Is it just a narrative that people say? Like, do you see that? Do you see a lot of first year players at Ohio State or anywhere else kind of running into feeling more tired, losing their legs, losing their jump shot? January, February, things like that, just because it's more basketball, or is it just an easy thing for a guy like me to say on a podcast?
No, it's a real deal. I think, and even physical, that could be a substantial part of it, but I think even more so mental, especially with NIL and all the things that these guys are dealing with now. Mentally, they didn't have to deal with this in high school or to this level. You know what I mean? Their best day in high school is every day in college. And that's why I kind of reference when I give them kind of context of what this thing's going to look like. Your best game in high school is just a typical Wednesday practice today when we hit the floor. We need that version of Junie right now. We need that version of Colin or Miles every day at practice to make this team better. So I think there's a mental and physical toll that, man, I got to be my best every single day. And, and there's over 100 practices in a season. So by the time they get to late December into January and we're, 50, 65 practices in, that could take a toll. You know what I mean? Some guys are really, really good at taking care of their bodies out off the court, uh, and some are not. So I think all those different factors play a role. Their influences and kind of the talk that's infiltrating their ears when they're not here. From coaches or parents or girlfriends or whoever, the media, social media. Um, a lot of guys like to read the comments. So I think sometimes all of those different things can wear on a player in different ways.
So that's something too that I've asked a lot of coaches and players about, especially is the role of social media in today's world, but also in college basketball, a program that has really, really high expectations, but has not performed up to those expectations for running on a decade now. It's
Yeah,
Ohio State's
yeah,
not been. I mean, you've been close plenty of times, but not where you want to be, which is competing for Big Ten titles, making runs in the NCAA tournament, and things like that. So, I mean, take this wherever you want. Like maybe you're having real conversations with players about what they're seeing on social media. I see it firsthand how nasty some fans can be to players who, at the end of the day, whether it's you, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's players, whoever's on the roster, like it's not like you're trying to lose. It's not
right,
like you're not working hard. Like this is real. You guys take this seriously.
right.
So how do you deal with that? How do you kind of help players walk through all the pressures that come with that? Like, just kind of take me through what comes top of mind in the entire landscape of social media and college basketball, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a loaded question there. I think the way that I approach it with the guys is it starts in the summertime with your habits, right? What are you letting in? What are you giving? How close are you building the team together? Like your team camaraderie, because all of that stuff comes to fruition when the you know what hits the fan later on in the season, right? When you're not playing as much, when your jump shot's not falling, when you know you're having problems at home or your parents are having problems, and all these different stresses start playing a role. Well, hopefully you have that foundation of a great relationship with your coaches and teammates. You have a great habit loop of waking up and putting in the work and eating breakfast and going to bed at a proper time, because if you don't, and you're kind of leaving caution to the wind and you're just doing, you're living willy nilly, and everything is affecting you, then, when those big tidal waves of stress start coming, man, you don't know how to handle it. You know what I mean? And they're going to come. And we always tell them, like, how you handle these things is just as important as, them happening to you. Everything is just going to happen to you, right? How do you deal with it? And you just hope that you have the maturity, the team's close enough to kind of bond together, help each other out. The coaches have great relationships with the players to kind of give them tools to get out of situations. But there's a lot that goes into it, Tim. You know what I mean? Like, but to me, and the way that I approach it, it all goes back to your habits. I'm not huge on social media. I may make an Instagram post here or there or check out Twitter, but I do my best to stay out of the comments. The fire banks, like you said, it's been 10 years since this program's been, really relevant. Well, I'm approaching season 9, and I came here to win. You know what I mean? So, I could easily be viewed as part of the problem. Um, but all I can do, and this is what I tell the team, all you can do is your very best, making sure that you're getting better every day, making sure that you're adding value to the program at a high level. And when it's time to compete, you cut loose and do what you got to do.
Has there been any conversation or meeting or communication in general about, at least under Diebler, because obviously if you lose a coach, whether they're fired or they depart, they part ways, whatever the communication is, or they take a better job, there's transition, and you have a new coach, and there's can be a lot of turmoil within the fan base. Has there been any conversations of like, guys, like, this sucks and fans are unhappy and there's a lot of pressure on us, here's how we deal with this? Or is it just more like one-on-one conversations? Like, how does a team at large deal with all the pressure that comes with being at Ohio State basketball?
I think we kind of nipped that in the bud on the recruiting trip. Guys know exactly what this is on their visit. This is the Ohio State University. We don't take a back door. We don't play second fiddle to anybody. Like, we're expected to win every single game that we compete in. And if we're not, then there's no reason not to. The resources that we have at this place, the fan base that's unbelievable. We have no excuse but to win. So I think it's up to the player to, again, manage that however they see fit, and the coaches to equip those players with tools on to succeed. Um, but I think everybody in the locker room and in this program understands what's at stake, and everybody understands like what we're fighting for every day. Like, we're here to win games and to represent this program, this state the right way, this fan base the right way, and I think that's what we're working towards.
So take me through, I guess, when the season ends and you're getting ready to put together some kind of offseason plan for a player. It may be way oversimplified by me saying, do you have a player bulk? Do you have a player cut? Like, I'm sure there's much more specifics around a plan for a player, but what kind of tests do you do, or how do you kind of assess where a player is and where you want them to be when they get back on campus in the fall?
Yeah, good question. I think that when they first get to campus, we can back up to there. When they first get to campus in June, we do a full comprehensive testing battery with our sports science department. We get body composition, so we find out exactly where a player's holding fat versus muscle, the composition of their makeup. Um, we're not necessarily looking at conditioning per se back in June, but as we go through the season, communication with the coaches of what type of player do they need to develop into. Where do you see Amari going? Like, where does Bruce take his next step to become first team All Conference and All American? Like, is it a step in his quickness? Does Devin need to work on his body composition? Is it his vertical jump? Like, where's Yvonne? How does Yvonne add value to this team coming up in the fall? So those are conversations that we have throughout the season and off season. And then, I'm at practice every day. I travel with the team, so I'm asking questions and poking, like, "Hey, coach, on that closeout, does he need to take longer steps and be more explosive? Does he need to have quicker feet laterally? What are you looking for?" And then when we're training and we're cutting our teeth in that weight room, I'm echoing that coach's sentiments to that player in my own way, right? When you're doing this lateral bound or front lunge, you need to work on deceleration and reapply that force into the ground and go vertical, or be ready to go in transition and take 3 steps down the floor, Yvonne, in an urgent manner, right? You can't just be slow and methodical. Or, hey, Amari, you got to get in shape, bud, or you can be sitting next to me. Whatever the case may be, everybody's different and comes from different backgrounds and needs to add value in different ways to this team. And I think that's where I come in and kind of apply that positive pressure and give them those tools in those ways.
So if you could provide a case study or some kind of story of, here are some players in my time at Ohio State where I've gone through that, where I've assessed, hey, like this player needs to get better, ABC, this is what we did, and then now the player, this is the output. Are there players that come to mind where you've kind of taken them through that journey and you say, man, I'm really proud of where we got this guy?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. Dwayne Washington, when he got in, just his approach, like, he wasn't quote unquote a weight room guy. And by the time he left, he loved to train, right? He physically transformed himself. Caleb Wesson, while he wasn't the strongest, he was a big boy coming out of high school, right? So he had to lose the fat, gain the muscle, and learn to apply force in the right way. Bruce Thornton, Bruce came in as, Mr. Basketball in Georgia and all those accolades and this and that. Bruce couldn't bench press 185 when he got here. It pinned him to the mat. So to see him kind of at the end of this summer, go well into the double digits on that one lift, that just shows that he's physically matured and gotten better, and he's able to withstand kind of the physicality of the Big Ten. Whereas I think his freshman year, it was kind of like, okay, let's go hoop. You know what I mean? You're a good player. Let's figure it out. And he's a competitor. He's a tough kid. But I think adding kind of that physical uh, kind of volume to him, and some of the other players, just that physical maturity helps these guys develop, and into the players they want to be.
So you mentioned with Dwayne Washington, a player who just didn't love being in the weight room, which I'm sure is something very common you see in
Yeah,
basketball. So how do you get a player to love training and lifting and all those types of things? Is it just showing them the progress, or how does that happen?
everybody's different. Some guys just come here to hoop, right? I have a particular player in mind. He literally told me that, coach, I came here to hoop. I didn't come here for class. I didn't come here for this weight room stuff. I came here to play ball. Um, and just to kind of educate them, to show them, like, I'm not here to stand in your way. I'm here to help you. And this is going to help your game. This weight room session, this weight room training environment is going to help you be a better player. Whether it is, like I said, your deceleration, your first step quickness, your vertical, your physicality, and able to hold off somebody trying to crawl up in you in your triple threat position. All of the different ways that physicality comes to fruition in the game. There's a rumor that they're trying to take physicality out of the game. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see when that day happens, because, we played in the most physical conference in basketball, and you can't be weak. And I tell guys that day one, like, there's no room for weakness within this program, mentally or physically. So that's something that we make a priority, is how you play and the manner in which you go about your business. And this team, uh, to their credit, for this last summer, they've done a really good job of leaning into the physical nature of the training and the preparation. I think we'll be a physical team coming up here this season.
So it's interesting you mentioned the physicality of the Big Ten. If you compare it to the SEC, for example, a lot more pace, a lot more running up and down the floor, and less physicality. It's just a different brand of basketball in the SEC
Yeah.
compared to the Big Ten. And that is true for just about any conference. So if Ohio State were in the SEC, if they were dropped in the SEC tomorrow, are you training your players differently and preparing them differently? Or does that kind of the sense of physicality and being able to take blows and things like that, does that transcend conference to conference, play style to play style?
I think it's play style to play style. Your head coach kind of sets the tone with how we want to play, right? Uh, Coach Holtman and Coach Diebler are two totally different head coaches in their approach and their manner in which they want to play the game. And the manner that we've trained them, like for the past, whatever, 8, 7 years that I trained under Holtman, we trained a certain way. And these past 2 seasons with Diebler, we've trained a completely different way. There's been a lot more of a speed focus and movement focus. And like he just sent me a text, like we need to work on this aspect of the game. Like we need to dial them up for the next 6 weeks leading into preseason practice. We need to get better in this area. So, maybe it's more movement versus strength versus conditioning. Every coach is different. You hear stories of coaches running these elaborate conditioning drills, or some coaches have these elaborate weight room sessions where guys are literally crawling out of the weight room after a lift. I think it's all dependent on uh, your head coach, your program, and how you go about your business.
So Coach Justice came on the show, kind of talked through we're doing things differently than we did this time last year to make sure guys are at their best, their healthiest,
Yeah,
that they're ready to go in March. That's when we need to play our best basketball.
yeah.
So obviously a lot of that comes from you. So what's been different this year compared to last year in terms of preparation and making sure guys are going to be fresh when you're in February and you're in March so you can make a push?
I think we've really done a great job of, and I've loved it, of making the weight room and training a priority this past off season. Whereas in the past we may have looked more at basketball. You know what I mean? And there's certain ebbs and flows that, of course, we're still on the court working on our craft and schematically what we're going to be putting in and all of those things. But we've really, really leaned into, and that's Coach Justice and Jamal and all the other assistants, Luke. Um, B. Walsh, saying, "Hey, the weight room matters, and we need to be present. We need to hold these guys accountable." Like I definitely do my job of holding them accountable, but it hits different when an assistant coach is right there with you in the weight room, pushing you. And we've had that all off season. It's been great, and I really appreciate their support.
So did you identify anything from last year? Because I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, I think injuries in large part can be pretty random. You can't really control, I guess, necessarily if a player gets run into or twisted up or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
Obviously, a lot of that may come with load management as well. But last year, I mean, a player leaves, which means minutes are everyone's going to see an uptick in minutes because
correct.
there's less minutes to be
Yeah,
distributed across the team. You deal with every single starter except for Bruce miss at least one game, and Bruce is banged up down the stretch. You have Avon, you have um, Austin, you have Colin, like so many players missing time, and then Tayson's out for the year as well.
yeah.
So, all that said, did you identify anything last year where you said, you know what, injuries happen because of this, or was it just this was kind of random and we would expect a return to the norm in the upcoming year?
Yeah, I definitely expect a return to the norm. Last year sucked from an injury standpoint. Um, there's certain things from how we trained to how we practiced to guys taking care of themselves. And we've identified a lot, not getting into, you know, case by case specifics, but we've done a great job of making sure we identified those areas and put a priority on guys being available. I think that was the day one message is, hey, you need to be available for your team. And if there's something going on, you need to communicate that with Q, with Tony, and let's work through it. I think sometimes guys want to tough it out and okay, coach, I'm cool, I'm good, I'm good. And maybe they need a day, maybe they need a little bit extra treatment, maybe they need some sleep. You know what I mean? I think their approach kind of speaks to some of those things, but we've definitely, and I've definitely approached this season differently from a kind of building them to be a little bit more robust down the stretch. And then, once we get into practice and in season, we'll work on some of the sexy, explosive, and basketball things. But this offseason has been really, really hard. And I think anybody will tell you that that's kind of been down there with us. But my goal for this whole offseason has been work capacity and building a robust athlete that can not just take a lick, but can give one too. and guys will be ready to go down the stretch. Like I said, January, February, March, when games matter, we're playing our best ball.
So you mentioned sleep. This is a unique question, I'm sure. Do you track your players' sleep?
We give them the option. The guys have different options from an Oura ring to a Whoop band, and sports science kind of takes that horse and runs with it. Um, but it's the land of resources here at Ohio State. If guys want to track their sleep, and from a certain angle, I can push them. Hey, you probably need to start looking at your sleep. But if a player is like, Coach, I'm not interested in that, I'm not going to keep pushing the narrative. But if somebody is interested in it, that's definitely something we can explore is, what time you go to sleep, your sleep environment, how long it takes you to fall asleep. Are you getting into REM cycles? Are you going into deep sleep? This is what happens when you're in those zones. There's definitely some benefit in knowing how much you sleep and the benefits it gives you. But then there's also players that freak out if they only got 4 or 5 hours of sleep and they get mental about it. So those are the players that you don't want to give too much information to because it can paralyze them. So I think everybody's different. So we treat it as a case by case basis.
So for players that you're helping with their sleep, you're tracking their sleep, whatever the case may be, do you look into the data and as you go through questions say, hey, like you should probably move your bedtime from 11 to 10, or you should probably move your wake up time from 6:30 to 5:30. It seems like your circadian rhythm or whatever would lend you to wake up or go to bed at a certain time. Like, do you start to kind of tweak and twist things based on
Yeah.
what you see?
Yeah. And that's definitely an avenue we go with some guys is look, it took you 45 minutes to fall asleep. You had your phone on, didn't you? Well, yeah, I couldn't fall asleep. So I was surfing IG. Or I was on TikTok. Okay, let's put the phone down, try to read a book, make your room colder. Let's get a weighted blanket, just different tools. Like I said, um, a, a, a scout and a personnel executive told me when I was at the Eagles, like the best coaches give their players tools. And I always grabbed onto that. Like, give your players tools to manage situations. So if it's sleep, what kind of tools can I give my guys to make sure they're getting the best quality sleep they can? Maybe you're dehydrated. Maybe, at dinner, it needs to be around this time. And this is a conversation we bring in the sport dietitian, but make sure we're hydrating. You know what I mean? Making sure we're not eating crap at 11 o'clock at night right before we go to bed. That can play with, like you said, your circadian rhythm. So a lot of different things, and education plays a big role of it. Of just teaching guys like, hey, this is the way you're going about it. We could probably do this a little bit differently, or fine tune here or there, and make recommendations. But these guys they're paid now. They're grown men. Some of them are growing men. So again, we just kind of educate them and give them tools like this is the best way to go about it in terms of sleep or anything else.
So I'm just gonna have to lean into this point. The topic of sleep and circadian, like that all intrigues me very much. And I wonder about this during the season. So this
Hmm.
is the Big Ten Conference that has
Mm.
18 teams,
Yep.
no longer in the Midwest. We go all the way out to LA and we go to Oregon and Washington. So when you have a time change, or if the Big Ten tournament is going to be played in Vegas or LA, for example, how do you set a schedule, set a plan, kind of help the coaching staff and help players get ready to go? I don't know what the case will be this year. Maybe you're going to Washington and Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get ready for that week of we're going to go out there, we're going to stay out there, we got to deal with the time change? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we loop in kind of professionals that are way smarter than me. Again, in our sports science department and our sports science consortium, we have several PhDs that lend their experience and knowledge to, hey, you're going out on this day, you may want to think about setting their clocks to this time or whatever the case may be. Um, we did a really good job. I felt like last year when we went to LA, we were there for a week. This next year will be a little bit different. I do believe we play Oregon and Washington, but like LA, we were in LA for the whole week and we just bust over and bust back to the hotel, to the facility. Whereas Washington and Oregon, we're going to take another flight from Washington to Oregon or vice versa, however that works. So that's going to be another midweek flight. So that's going to feel more like a typical week. Will just be, if that makes sense, on the West Coast. Um, So, if it's recovery tights, if it's nutrition, if it's hydration, if it's, hey, let's wake up a little bit early and do a yoga session to kind of get your circadian rhythm kind of going. And so we're not feeling groggy. Or when we land, hey, nobody go to sleep. We've done this with teams in the past. Don't go to sleep. Let's not take a nap. Let's get up, go to the mall, walk around, keep these guys kind of active. And then at the end of the day, crash so we can wake up in 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, wake up with a walkthrough and kind of reestablish what a normal day looks like. You know what I mean? I think in LA last year we tipped off at like 10 p.m. So we started the day much, much later. We let those guys sleep in. They woke up. We got a little flow session. We gave them plenty of time away. Get outside, kind of get grounded, get some sunlight, go see the sights, smell the smells, whatever, come back. And then let's practice and just extend the day. So I think, when you go out west and then when you come back, that's kind of the hard part is when you come back um, to the distractions and some of the white noise that you have because you have to play a game in a couple of days as soon as you get back. So we have to manage all that.
So I read one very captivating book on sleep for some guy who traveled with some soccer teams out in Europe and writes a book on all this stuff. Something that I read in there was sleep kits, where essentially a person in your role would learn how this person sleeps best, give them the best type of pillow, the best type of mattress, the best type of blanket, all the
Yep.
hydration or whatever they may need, so that when they're on the road, it feels like they're right at home. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's things that you have to do too to make these guys feel like, even though it feels like it's, dinner time, it's actually we're going to get ready for bed soon because we're out west, for example. So
Yep.
are there specific things that you're doing to kind of help these guys stay comfortable and feel sleepy or not sleepy? Like how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's I think it plays into the scheduling, how we schedule it, and Dave Egelhoff, our our operations guy, does a great job of understanding what's required. But if it's nutrition plays a big role with that. So our sports dietitian, and what they eat and when they eat it, she comes up with a schedule like, hey, it's 3 hour time difference, making sure that hey, Eagle, she gets with our operations guy, hey, Eagle, when they land, they need a meal at this time. We need to have a snack at this time. Q, make sure we're hydrated in a hotel if she doesn't travel with us. Making sure guys have this or that, at the appropriate times. And then at the end of the day, you guys got to go to bed. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
can't bring your PlayStation with you and play Fortnite all night or whatever they're doing. Um, they got to take it seriously and be professionals and do what they got to do.
So from your time with the Colts and the Eagles, what from your time in the NFL have you been able to take and apply now to college basketball?
What have I applied? Wow, that's a lot, a lot. Dealing with professionals in the NFL and now this new, I call it the new athlete that's getting paid and transfers and all the different things like I don't know for sure, but I'm sure we have guys making seven figures on our roster. So dealing with young professionals and what's required and the approach necessary, just when you see it every day at that level in the NFL, it you can't help but apply it to an 18 and 19-year-old that you see going down the same path. Like, hey, you're going to be a pro one day if you're good enough. You need to look at these things. These have been pitfalls that I've witnessed guys make. Um, and you're just kind of lending your experience, whether it be socially or mentally, physically. Of course, we're going to train and do what we got to do in that room downstairs, and bang weight and get stronger and all that great stuff. But I think managing the stresses and the requirements of all the things required to be a student athlete, I think that's been the part that when you see Andrew Luck do it at a high level and Mike Vick do it at a high level and you're watching Chuck Pagano and Chip Kelly kind of lead men. I'm writing down little sayings and nuances. Chuck Pagano, his first day, at a training camp, wrote down "be relevant." On the dry erase board, be relevant. What does that mean? That means that how can I be relevant, coach? Well, you have to add value. So those are two things that I have written down on my dry erase board downstairs. Like you have to add value to this team, and you have to be relevant. You know what I mean? We have to be relevant as a team, and not just relevant, not just competitive, but We should be, running with the big dogs of the Big Ten and nationally, and get back to the conversation. You know what I mean? Like, not just, oh, that was a close one. How many 1 point, 2 point games, one possession games did we have last year that we didn't finish the job? Those are things that we've really emphasized this past offseason of, really embracing the margins and making sure that we win those details.
Second to last question here. So I'm curious about, what does your role look like in game when the clock goes from 20 minutes and 0 seconds and begins ticking down? What does your life look like and your role look like as the team goes out and performs on the court?
Yeah, I wish I had some pom poms because I could just go Bucks. No. I tell them all the time, I'm your best cheerleader. I have the best seat in the house. I love to sit back and just watch them work on the floor. Coaches coach basketball. If I see an effort thing or something that is in my space, I'm trying to make sure that I stay in my lane. During the game. And of course, I'm animated and excited just as much as anybody else. Like, I want to see our guys do well. It's exciting to see them perform because, if anybody knows, I know how much work they put into that moment, right? I know how many times they didn't want to wake up. They couldn't get that rep, or we had to push them through, and guys had to help each other, and the team cohesiveness. Like, you see all of those things coming to fruition during the game. So I'm as excited as anybody to see kind of our work manifest itself. Um, but from 20 to 00, I'm asking coaches what they need. They're asking me, Coach, do you see anything? Like, if a guy's fatigued or tired or injured, or me and Tony are have a keen eye on our players on the floor. If something doesn't look right, we see them every day in practice, and if Bruce is hobbling, I can check on him and say, hey, how's the wheel? You okay? Like, what's going on? I got hit in the rib. I'm fine. Okay, cool. I got a headache. I can't even see straight. I'm looking at stars right now. Hey, Coach, Tony, whatever. We may need to get on a break, and let's manage this however we need to see fit. But just working the day to day and in the moment type stuff, like making sure the guys are hydrated, motivated, locked in, focused. But yeah, being ultimate cheerleader. That's really my game day responsibility. We warm them up, of course, and make sure they're ready and prepared to play. But once that ball goes up, like, it's go Bucks.
All right, Q Banks, last question here for you. What's your message to Buckeye Nation for 2025 and beyond?
Message would be, come early, stay loud, stay late, be loud, cheer on the Bucks. Like, we really appreciate the support from our fan base and supporters and alumni. Like, we lean into all of that. Keep it going, hold us accountable. Like, we're anxiously waiting to get on the floor and prove our worth.